So good morning. This is the last class, as rightly told, and not only the last class for this particular semester, but I think this is the last class with you. You are living this semester, so your course is over. And today, what I want to do is nothing but a wind-up kind of discussion. Wind-up kind of discussion, where I want to show the application of whatever you have studied so far in this particular program in the actual realistic chip form. So what I will do, I will present before you a very advanced VLSI chip, some little description of that kind of chip and how all these concepts have been utilized in that. So the chip which I will discuss today is really an advanced, in fact very advanced. This is a chip I want to just discuss. It was actually a very advanced one, till reported, is not commercialized, I don't think so, and it is announced in 1994. It is a NEC chip. Nippon Electric Company is a NEC chip and announced in 1994. As you know, that particularly with the advent of the following things. One is multimedia, in connection with picture processing. The other is your so-called graphical user interface, graphics in general. For these two kind, and similarly there are lots of other applications in which what we have to do really, we have to handle very large volume of data, and not only that, this data naturally is a very large volume, you have to store in very high capacity memory, and thirdly you have to process them relatively fast. Particularly today's picture processing come multimedia applications where there are picture frames which are repeatedly changing, so every time we are getting bulk of data, and this data, you know that you have to handle this very large amount of data and process them as fast as possible in real time. And in that kind of application, you know that this multiprocessors, parallel processing system with a large memory, peripheral memory, is becoming a very important necessity of today, and there VLSI is playing a major role. It could not be that today's application, which has come out recently in various, I think you are going through the recent popular articles on electronics, say IEEE Spectre, for example. If you go through the recent articles there, you will find there are hundreds and thousands of very interesting applications which could not have been realized unless that today's VLSI scenario, at very advanced VLSI concept, if it would not have been there, then naturally this could have been just a dream, remained a dream. And therefore, as you know, for such kind of applications, you need, as I told you, the high speed parallel processing. You have to do parallel processing or distributed processing, but for chip realization, parallel processing is more convenient, and huge memory. and very large memory bandwidth. These are the two very important requirements for realizing such. Normally, they are called systems. You cannot call it really a circuit. It is a system, a very big system. But we are now, as I told you in the very beginning of this course, that we are visualizing systems integrated in a single chip. Okay. So I will try to give today a realistic example of how a big system can be realized on a small single chip. Problem of realizing a very large system on a chip is, what is the problem? Main problem is very, very complex there, and the functions have to be done by a very large number of devices, MOSFETs for example. And if you want to integrate the entire thing on a chip, the power dissipation becomes too high, even CMOS technology, unless you take very special care. The power dissipation may be unmanageable, okay? And you have to innovate some device or circuit concept so that the power dissipation can be minimized. And secondly, as soon as you put the main processor in one chip and the memory is in the other chips, which is usually done, called multi-chip packaging. Main processor in one chip and the huge RAM or cache and all this, whatever is the DRAM, etc., whatever is required for your work, normally they are put as secondary chips around the main chip, and there may be a single package. Externally, you may look at a single package. The problem is that the transmission delay, etc., from the main chip to the outside peripheral memory chips, that finally limits the memory speed, access speed, and ultimately the overall data handling rate of the memories. Overall data handling rate of and that is very important here. Therefore, it is from that point of view, if you can integrate the memory chips along with the processors, then you can achieve a very, very high memory access speed, and memory bandwidth means memory utilization capacity. Okay, and such chip was proposed by NEC. They are in their ULSI laboratory. There is a special laboratory which is engaged for ULSI, the futuristic kind of VLSI, and so they have proposed here. In fact, they have made the chip, and I'm sure that within a few years, or maybe this year itself, or maybe next year, the chip will be commercialized. It's a very interesting chip and excellent chip. Because it is such an attractive chip, I thought that in the last class, let me highlight some of the important features of this chip. So let me discuss that. The chip, which is called IMAP chip, is specified by the following features: high memory bandwidth, which is 1.28 gigabit per second, low power consumption, forward maximum. It contains a 2 megabit SRAM with 128 IO interfaces, input-output interfaces. It's just on a chip, 2 megabit SRAM. You just imagine, it's a very fantastic thing. It also contains 64 processor elements. Which has got a registers, logics, everything. I will just abbreviate as P's. Then the peak performance of the chip which they have reported is 3.84 giga instructions per second, by the 64 processors working in parallel, okay? By the 64 processor elements working in parallel. The memory access is intentionally designed as twice as fast as the PE execution time. Memory access is twice as fast as the PE execution time, the logic speed of the process elements, and the memory, there is as fast, memory is faster, but it has to be done, otherwise there is always chance of slips, unreliability problem. There is a special dynamic power control circuit to reduce memory power dissipation. This is very important. Such a huge memory with 2 megabit SRAM on a single chip, they will otherwise draw a lot of power. So there is some special dynamic, particularly sensing circuitry, is so designed that that is very high speed. At the same time, the power dissipation is also very low. It is just around 4 watt maximum. That is very important. There is, you know, that because there are so many transistors packed in a single chip, there will be always chance of device failures. And it is such an expensive chip, and if you have to reject the chip for small failures, it will be very, very expensive process. So what is done, there is a lot of redundancy, extra devices, extra processors, extra memory elements embodied into the system, and there is some kind of arrangement for self-testing, by which after the fabrication of the chip, you can detect which RAM cells are not working or which RAM blocks are not working, and it can be eliminated by fusing arrangement, some in-house fusing arrangement. Okay, this is a very innovative concept. It's very innovative concept. So there is some 4-way, very novel 4-way redundancy, block redundancy called, they have called block redundancy. And that is the aspect of any modern VLSI chip. You have to put a lot of redundancy, so that, and there should be some self-diagnostic, self-testing, self-error checking kind of algorithm in software and hardware, by which you can detect that and eliminate that also. Then finally, you can imagine that this chip contains 11 million MOSFETs. Imagine 11 million, 10 to the 7, 1 crore. In our Indian language, 1 crore components in a chip. Chip size is not large, really small, 15.1 millimeter by 15.6, the real value as quoted in the paper. The technology is 0.55 micron BiCMOS. 0.55 micron BiCMOS, which contains, it's very, very advanced, 4 poly levels and 2 metals. That means it is 6-level metallization scheme. Fantastic. Otherwise, you know, 11 million transistor, if you want to interconnect by the ordinary 2-3 level of metallization, you cannot manage. Space utilization, misutilization will be too much. That's why they have used 6 level, I think that how much labor they have put, analytical labor, for carving, for reducing the EMI EMC effects. You please imagine, I think this chip design, perhaps a very large number of people with lot of money was involved in this design. And fabrication, forget, that's a very big thing. The SRAM cell size very small. You see that SRAM cannot be managed with a number of transistors less than 6. You know that. But advanced SRAMs have now come where the pull-up transistors have been replaced by, I think I have mentioned earlier, by polyresistors, high-value polyresistors. Very latest SRAMs contains 4 MOSFETs, 2 MOSFETs being the drivers, 2 MOSFETs being the input and output, that switches, and instead of the 2 pull-up transistors, MOSFETs, we use high values of extra small polyresistors. They are not active loads but passive loads. Please remember this. And that is the technology where they are used in SRAM. The package is a very advanced radiation hardened 206 pin package. Imagine 206 pins are there. So the pins, in this case, the pins will not come out from the ends. It are all distributed in the surface. It works at clock rate of 40 megahertz, and we shall see that usually the 40 megahertz is the clock used for the logic operations, whereas for effective clock speed for the memory operation is 80 megahertz, just double of that. And the supply voltage for this chip is 3.3 volt maximum. So this is in short the specification, the base specifications of the chip. I think you have noted, all right? Now let us quickly discuss about the chip architecture, the kind of architecture or chip block diagram. This is main word decoder, and this is the where 64 kilobit SRAM is placed. There are 20 such SRAMs. Each block is a 64 kilobit SRAM, and there are 20 such blocks on either side of this area, which is occupied by the main word decoder portion of the chip. Okay. So this is actually the architecture of the chip. So it is designed in a mirror image type, more symmetric kind of fashion. You see that the two SRAMs, so a set of blocks, there are 20 blocks of 64 kilobit SRAM on both sides, on either sides of the main processor elements. Then here we have got the processor elements 32 here, 16, 16 and 16, 16, 32 here. So there are 64 processor elements. This is the memory bus which communicates the memory cells with the processor element as well as with the external world. Okay, this is the main bus which acts as the communicator between the processor elements. And finally, exactly the similar arrangement is there, and this is a more or less a symmetric kind of design. If you look at the chip, it looks like this. I think you have an idea. It is a square kind of chip. You see, around 1.5 centimeter by 1.5 centimeter chip, and this region is occupied by the processor elements, whereas these two regions are occupied by the SRAMs. Only here and here there is a small region where we have kept the main word decoders. Okay, and here this space is occupied, as well as this space is occupied by the buses for the main memory, as well as between for the Ps, the so-called processor elements. In fact, if you draw a little bit some details about how the block schematic of this region internally looks like, it is something like this. Say each 64 kilobit SRAM, you can draw it like this. One block, okay. Then there is I'll draw it like this. There are two processor elements, identical. I'll call it P1 and this is P2. Intermediate, there is a memory, is a segment of memory bus, and I'll read it. You see that this memory bus, what is its function? It communicates, that means you can have access of this SRAM by an outsider. That means you can use it as a memory chip. Suppose I want to use it as a memory chip, I can do that. I have access to that through this memory bus. Similarly, the same memory chip, memory block, is accessed by two Ps. Normally it is designed like this. Each memory block of 64 kilobit, there is a direct access with two processor elements as indicated here. Similarly, it is arranged like this in the upper row as well as in the lower half of the chip. And this one has got a number of structures that is called memory data registers, which is 8-bit. Each processor element consists of many blocks, many sub blocks. Then memory address register, again 8 bit. You please see that I think you are not able to read it. Between this memory and all these SRAMs, their access is through 4-bit 80 megahertz clock. 4-bit, I have written 4-bit 80 megahertz here, 4-bit 80 megahertz and 4-bit 80, which is I think it is not much eligible. That's why I am saying. Then we have got a set of registers, a large set of registers, block of registers, and finally we have got the logic block, which is 8-bit ALU and plus 8-bit shifter. And this one is exactly identical. I am reading. This is memory data register 8-bit. This is memory address register 8-bit. This is the main register of this PE 8-bit, and this is the main ALU, that is the logics. Main logic circuits are contained in this block, which is these blocks. It is not necessary that they are placed within the chip, or there may be some different kind of. This is just a block schematic. This particular block contains the main logic of that ALU and other shift registers, as in these are all 8-bit. Exactly the same thing for PE2, and this communicates with the so-called main bus, at 8-bit 40 megahertz. Effectively 4-bit 80 megahertz. Effectively 4-bit 80 megahertz. So you see that the main thing, that is the thing, that the SRAMs, they are working at an effective clock frequency of 80 megahertz, whereas the processor elements, they are operating at 40 megahertz. This is 80 megahertz and this is 40 megahertz. This should be noted, and that has been done to improve the reliability. There are many aspects. I don't have much time to discuss all these things. As I told you that there is a special, I think you cannot read it, but I'll just discuss. This particular chip has the facility of, that there is some lot of redundancy. How is it done? Normally redundancy has not been done in the Ps. P transistors in the Ps are not that small, whereas the transistors in the memories are extremely small, because it is a very high capacity memory. SRAM 2 megabit on a chip is something really unheard, unthinkable 2-3 years ago. Now it is 2-3 years ago in the chip. Now of course the paper was there. But it's really unthinkable. But now the technology has, one has achieved, particularly Japanese are very efficient to achieve the memory technology of the so-called latest type of generic. But you see, in doing so, the transistor size is extremely small. Extremely small. They dissipate, each of them dissipate a very little amount of power. On the other hand, the processor elements, it is not needed to make them so small. Okay? Not so. Therefore, it has been found, whatever they have reported, that the failure rates of the processor elements were practically very small, so that a so-called yield is concerned. Yield means out of 100 chips, how many are really operational at the end, and that is called a percentage yield of a VLSI product. Typically, a factory, a VLSI foundry, tries to keep the yield above 80%. That's that. In fact, I was told by some hardcore people in Texas Instruments that for certain products, the yield is even almost 100%. Okay, but it is a very difficult thing. But anyway, with the innovations of technology, processing, or full automation without any man support, etc., it has been possible to achieve such an yield, even with the technology which is as small as 0.5 micron, 0.6 micron kind of thing. But in the SRAMs, which is so packed, there are so many devices that it is at this stage when these people reported, Japanese people reported in 1994, it was not that much mature that they could achieve very high order of device failure, almost zero device failure rate for this thing. So what they did, they introduced appreciable amount of redundancy in the SRAMs and not in the Ps, in the processor elements. You have noted that there are 20 64 kilobit SRAMs. Actually needed is 16 because it is 2 megabit. The 16 and 1632, effectively it gives you 2 megabit memory capacity. Is 64 kilobit, but they have kept 4 extra. In this have 4 extra, in this have 4 extra. What they have done is, inside their chip, there is some extra circuitry, they call it 4-way block redundancy selector circuit. Somewhere here, between the between the SRAM blocks and the Ps, in between the memory buses, some special inbuilt circuits have been inbuilt. They are not that complicated circuit, and this circuit has got the function of detecting via, of course, some special program written and loaded into the Ps. Okay, and through that there is some special arrangement that details there is not much detail available. This program and this special circuit, by operating that just immediately after the fabrication in the probing station without breaking the chip, okay, they can communicate with the main memory. Main memory means the so-called SRAM, and easily find out that which blocks are defective. And these blocks must be removed from the circuits. If they are present in the circuit, you are in trouble. So what they do, in the paths which connect the memories, the processor elements with the memories, in each path there is a polysilicon fuse link, which I discussed earlier. Polysilicon fuse link, okay? When they find, they say this particular block is defective, they search out the particular fuse links and blow them off. By sending a heavy current, they blow them off, simply blow them off, and as a result, this will be disconnected from the P and disconnected from the main bus, memory bus itself. That's how you can easily detect which SRAM blocks are defective and how to remove them from the circuit. This is done using a special circuit. As I told you, they have called it 4-way block redundancy selector circuit, and which contains some space fuses called, but they have written simply fuses. I am sure this must be polysilicon fuse links, and which must be, this is such a small chip that it has to be operated at extra small current level, and that's how they have developed it, so that whatever, if I find that this one is defective here, this one is defective here, this one is defective here, and this one is defective here, they can search it out and they can remove them electrically from the from the processor elements influence, as well as from the outside, that is from the memory buses themselves. Okay, so these arrangements they make so that now the chip functions. But you can now ask me that how they decide that only 4 has to be kept redundant out of 20. You can ask me that question. This is their yield, that they have studied this circuit for years, maybe for quite some good amount of time, and they know everything. And they know what kind of defects are there usually occur, and they know the percentage failure rate, etc. And based on that experience, using their statistical data processing, okay, they finally have concluded that whatever technology they have in NEC at that time, a redundancy of 4, if they can keep, that will give an yield which is profitable. That profit is something very important in all, any business in commercial operations. They have found that keeping a redundancy of 4 is quite all right, and that's how they have chosen. That is why. Therefore, but sometimes it may happen that in certain chips 6 are found not working. 6 RAM, it has to be simply rejected. Simply it has to be, otherwise it will not work. It has been designed in such a way that if there is minimum 2 megabit of SRAM working, then only it will work. Otherwise it will not work efficiently. So that thing has been taken into account. And there are many more details. I do not want to go into those details because the last class of this lecture series. So I do not want to go into the details of that. But what I wanted to emphasize, that I wanted to give you an idea about what VLSI system means. What was the name of the course? VLSI integrated circuits and systems. You could have asked me in the very beginning, what are the circuit? You have been taught only circuits, but that is also not true. You know that the PLAs, etc., whatever I have discussed, they are basically systems. And the circuits, normally small modules, are called circuits. In fact, they are system. You can realize any finite state machines, any kind of I have discussed something about the gate arrays. In a gate array, you can realize a system. But whenever you are, that I do not know, you don't have I found in a class that very few of you have got the habit of going through the journals. For example, if you had gone through a very important journal in this particular field called IEEE Journal of Solid State Circuits, you will find there are plenty of examples where single chip systems. And nowadays, the single chip systems are mostly multimedia. I have seen there is a lot of craze of multimedia. Most of the papers are on the multimedia aspect. But there are definitely biomedical chips, automation chips, computers, single chip computers, and all these things are there. That the aim is to realize the whole thing in a single chip. Why? Why people are so much crazy about the single chip realization? Can you tell me? One is definitely the cost. Naturally, cost. That will be the first. If I can realize a whole IBM, I remember that's how the concept first came. Once upon a time, IBM 370 computer was considered as a very big system. And 10 years ago, a single chip came to realize the whole IBM 370. And now you have seen the kind of desk computers which are available, which practically works around a single chip. There are some peripheral one, but main chip is the main processor chip, which performs the main. But that things are changing. Just the processing, no longer the sequential one is serving the purpose. The so-called the PCs, the kind of processing which you use in PCs, that is not serving the processor. So people are going for that the CATs, the workstations concept, where multi-processing, parallel processing, distributed processing, etc. is being done. And if you just open an advanced, whatever available in India today, an advanced mini computer, desk computer, you find there are a lot of PC cards, and each PC card, which is called a module, contains a lot of chips. And we are doing, mostly that they are basically a parallel processing. There are a lot of parallel processing concept being introduced in today's desk processors, whatever is it called, VLSI processors for digital signal processing, DSP processor, for example, or normal, the computers, which are very high speed and in a limited high speed in the effectively. May not be the clock rate is not that high, but its processing capability is fantastically high because of the parallel processing, as well as nowadays distributed processing is also coming in a big way for that kind of capability. But that this demands a lot of cost, a lot of chips, a lot of circuitry, and it is a very difficult thing. And then failure rate, as you know, if you go on increasing your components, if you are going on increasing in the number of PCBs which you are using, not only the power dissipation is increasing, not only the cost is increasing, the failure rate is simultaneously increasing. So the main motivation factor for the mad rush towards the realization of single chip VLSI systems is, one is definitely is power dissipation, second definitely is the cost, but third, perhaps the most important, is the failure rate, the reliability. a single chip version of the whole system is expected if it is performed. Of course, not by a second order company. Maybe, yeah, I think you have the experience that there are Hitachi in Japan, and there is a number 2 kind of company, maybe in Taiwan. And say in our digital watch chips as well as the pocket calculator, the calculators, etc., you know that the original things are much better functioning than the ones which are made in some other company, because the reliability aspect is very important. And this type of things, whatever I have discussed today, is very advanced VLSI. And it is called QLSI, Ultra Large Scale Integrated. What is the other name for it? Ridiculously large, which I mentioned earlier, RLSI, ridiculously large integrated circuit, where people are thinking of features which is as small as 0.5 micron, 0.4. This is a 0.55 micron BiCMOS technology. Why BiCMOS and not only CMOS? For higher speed. Only CMOS, there is a limitation, particularly in memory application, there is a limit. The sense amplifier speed ultimately controls the speed. But if you can have BiCMOS, you can improve fantastically the speed. What is the other point for using BiCMOS? Power, drivability. If this chip has to drive some outside chips, if you have bipolar transistors in the output circuitry, it can drive a lot of power. The need of interfacing modules is called buffer modules. Need of interfacing buffer modules can be minimized by using the BiCMOS technology. So today, whatever I have discussed, I think I have been able to give you an impact, an idea about what a very advanced VLSI system is. So with that, I will stop today, and if you have some queries, I think we can discuss after this class. Okay, thank you.